If you could get the financing to make anything you want, what would you make and why?
Whoa, that is such a good question. Better Nate Than Ever 2, because I think Nate has more adventures in him, Steve.
You've already written 2 sequels.
It's true. I somehow, against all odds, have a trilogy of books. I think the answer, and this is true, is that like Disney has such a trove of IP that I'm just starting to sort of imagine, what's the backstory and what's the next big thing that could just be an absolute blast to dive into. And I love musicals and I love sort of like big magical worlds. And so I'm going through long lists right now trying to find that next big thing.
If you could go back in time, and I know you're a Broadway fan, if you could go back in time to any previous Broadway production and watch it, what would you watch and why?
I mean, incredible question. I think I would go to the opening night of Cats on Broadway, because I'd want to know if people in the audience thought it was insane that people were like crawling around in unitards, howling and singing, or if it really was the sort of instantly iconic Broadway smash that history tells us it was. It's so campy and bizarre, and Cats to me is sort of the example of the sort of highs and lows of theater. You've got like the incredible music and also the incredible absurdity of adults with whiskers. And I wanted to bring some of that high and low to this movie as well.
It is very great. It is so weird that is the production that lasted for so long.
It was like, but I do remember when I first moved to New York City, there were ads and the tagline for Cats was Now and Forever. And when I first moved there, it was like Now and Forever, closing this January. They're like, even Cats, 9 lives, but eventually everyone hits their 10th life.
Talk a little bit about the journey of making this film. You obviously wrote the book. Was this something that almost was directed by somebody else, or were you holding this back to be like, I'm making this movie?
I've been wanting to make a Better Nate Than Ever film for a while, but I think a lot of things had to happen. I had to have like the perfect cast. And I think, Rueby Wood and Aria Brooks would co-star in the film. They were the perfect age. They were both 14 when we shot it. Any other time in the history of the world, they would have been too young or they would have outgrown it. And then in my experience show running High School Musical for the last 3 years, you get such a crash course in all things stress and script writing and time management. And so it all sort of converged at the same time to be, I think, perfect timing.
Well, listen, this movie doesn't work without Ruby. And what was it like casting and getting Ruby? Because were you nervous after casting him that you're like, we got to start filming. I don't want him to grow 6 inches. I don't want his voice to change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I worked on the show Billy Elliot on Broadway, and just when the guys would go into the show and learn every dance and learn every song, almost a week later, their voice would change. And so for a role like Nate, who is right at the center of a coming of age story about identity and finding his people, I had to find a kid who really represented that authentically. The biggest risk with Rueby Wood was that he had never appeared on camera. He's like a real deal theater kid. And I had a lot of spirited conversations with Disney. He had 7 callbacks because I saw something in him that was like a diamond in the rough in every sense of that phrase. He was not yet shining perfectly, but I knew he would get there. And he was, I thought, astonishing in the role.
Oh, Ruby is very good in the role. You cast, you nailed it on that one.
Thank you.
So listen, I love talking to directors about the editing room, just because that's where it all comes together.
Yes,
so how did this film possibly change in the editing room versus what you expected?
I have this incredible editor named Katie McQuarrie who cut a bunch of the Coen Brothers films. And she and I were in collaboration even during production, because I went in with a really, really tight shot list that was very much inspired by Edgar Wright, the transitions Edgar does so famously that are so rude and fast and funny. But I also wanted to evoke the sort of coming of age adventures films of the 80s. And so how it changed in editing is that I like music to really drive a lot of emotion. And so when you have a composer like Gabriel Mann, who's best known for Modern Family, and he's making his big feature debut with this film, we worked hand in hand where I would send him a clip and say, I think this can be funnier. I think I've done everything I can do with picture. What do you got? And 2 hours later, Gabe would be like, try this. And he'd send something back with a xylophone. And I'd be like, we did it. So a lot of the editing room is like, you get to write the final draft of the movie.
Oh, 100%. Did you end up with a lot of deleted scenes or no?
We have a handful of deleted scenes, and they were only deleted because they either took away from pacing or they took us off Nate's journey. I sort of think of Better Nate Than Ever as Ferris Bueller for theater kids. And so Nate is very much the Matthew Broderick Ferris Bueller of the film. And I think the through line of the film is a kid who's a big dork in his hometown who wants to get out and make something of himself. And anything deleted was anything extraneous that didn't sort of support that adventure.
I definitely have to ask you before I run out of time, what is it like getting the keys to Sister Act?
I mean, I grew up as a Sister Act super fan. I could still sing Joyful, Joyful, Lauryn Hill, the second movie. And so the opportunity to sort of take a franchise like Sister Act, the same way I was sort of handed High School Musical, it's a complete honor. And my dream is to get nuns singing, all across the world.
How is the script progressing on that? Are you actually going to be filming this year?
I hope we are. I think the Sister Act franchise is a big priority to the studio. Script's coming along, and I think Whoopi's really excited. And now it's just about schedules and chips falling where they may.
I've heard the word scheduling from so many directors that I don't think people realize outside of town what that word really
means. It's everything. It's
Yeah.
Literally like the availability of a convent and the availability of an EGOT.
What are you thinking about for directing in the future? Are you hoping to possibly make, besides Sister Act, are you hoping to possibly make a sequel to this? Are you looking towards another musical?
I would love to expand the Nate cinematic universe. I will say, Rob Marshall's kind of my hero. When I was 12 years old, Rob Marshall directed me in a production of Oliver in my hometown of Pittsburgh. And I have been quietly following in his footsteps and in his shadow for almost 30 years. And so what he's been able to do, creating these beautiful visual musical event films, is kind of my dream too.
On that note, I got to stop. I'm just going to say again, really congrats on this.
Thank
you.
And
I really sincerely hope it's a big hit for you guys.
It means a lot to me, Stephen. Thank you. I'm a huge Collider fan. It means a lot. Thank you.